Welcome to this lesson on percents, fractions, and decimals. We're going to talk about what is a percent and how to convert it to a fraction and a decimal. So percent, we want to look at the two words here, and the first word that we're going to focus on is cent. So cent, we hear the word cent in like when we talk about cents and dollars, and you know there are 100 cents in a dollar. You also hear the word cent in century. There are 100 years in a century. So what we're getting at here is that with cent, you're talking about 100. Right? So per cent, okay, and we have the word per. So we hear the word per all the time, like in miles per hour. So per cent means per 100. So 50% means 50 per 100. Right? So anytime you're talking about a percent, you're comparing stuff out of 100s. Like if you have a percentage on your test, that's saying if the test was out of 100 questions, you would have gotten 75% right if you got or 75 right if you would have a 75%. All right, but it's not all the time that everything is out of 100. So sometimes we have to do a little bit of converting, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So the fraction bar means per. That's what you want to remember when you're converting between fractions or percents and fractions. So first, write 40% as a fraction. So start by remembering that it's per cent means per 100. So start by just writing 40 per 100. Then simplify. You know that you can divide both of these numbers by 10, which would give you, so if you divide both of them by 10, gives you 4. This gives you 10, but you can divide it again by 2. So you know that you can actually divide each of these by 20, but since we started with 10, which is just fine, here we get 2, and here we get 5. So 40% written as a fraction in simplest form is 2/5. Your best bet is always to start by just putting it over 100 and going from there. Right? Sometimes what I like to do when it's a multiple of 10, so like 40 over 100, sometimes I'll just right off the bat just say, well, I know that that is just 4 over 10. And then I can simplify from there because they both divide by 2 and I get 2/5. So whatever works for you. If this method works better and you want to work your way up to simplifying it more quickly, or if that method works, you just stick with it. All right, our goal is to get to that simplified answer and to know that 40% is the same thing as saying 2/5. So let's say you had a test. What this would mean is, let's say you had a test that had 5 questions. And so you had 2 correct out of 5. That would be 40%. You got 40% of the test right. Okay, so 45%. So in this case, if you want to pause and try it on your own and come back and check your answer, that's fine, or we can keep working through it. So again, follow your steps. 45 over 100. They're both divisible by 5. 45 divided by 5 is 9. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So as a fraction, 45% in simplest form is 9/20. Again, fairly easy, just always remembering that it's per 100 because that's what percent means. All right, so I'm going to drag the percentages that have the equivalent value into the bubble. You're just going to write them in on your notes. Again, if you would like to pause and try it on your own, you're more than welcome to. So I'm going to start with 9/25. So the best bet is to look at the fraction and say, okay, well, I'm going to turn the fraction into something out of 100 so that way I can have a more easily found percentage. So to get to 100, I have to multiply 4 by 25. So I have to multiply 9 by 4, which gives me 36 out of 100. So in this case, my correct percentage would be 36%. Okay, and then here we have 20. I have to multiply 20 by 5, which means I have to multiply 11 by 5, which gives me 55 per 100. So 55%. So 55% would be my correct answer. And I actually would like you to try the last three on your own, and when you come back, we'll check your answer. All right, so here we have 23%. That one was pretty easy because it was already out of 100 or per 100. In this case, I like to think of fourths. We know that fourths, or when we talk about fourths, we can talk about quarters. So 1/4 equals 25 cents. So when you talk about 1/4, that's also 25%. 2/4 gives you 50 cents, so that's also 50%. And 3/4 gives you 75 cents, which is 75%. So I know 3/4 is 75%. Otherwise, I multiply both. And I would like you to get to the point where you have this memorized because that's going to make your life a lot easier. So we have both of these times 25, which would have given you 75 per 100, 75%. And then here again, you multiply by 4. You get 100 and you get 68, so 68%. All right, so now when we're writing percents as decimals, you still want to remember that it's per 100. So first let's look at what happens when we change that percent to a fraction. So if you write it as a fraction first, it's 62 per 100 because we're talking about 62%. I know 62 over 100 as a decimal means it has to end in the hundredths place. So my decimal is 62 hundredths. Again, 33% means 33 over 100. And then that tells me that it has to end in the hundredths place. So 33%, or 33 hundredths. Now, do you notice a pattern though? 62% changed to 62 hundredths. And 33% changed to 33 hundredths. What we should be able to see is that our decimal moves 2 places to the left. Okay, so it always is at the end of a number, just like a period's at the end of a sentence. Then when I'm converting it to a decimal from a percentage, because a percentage isn't a number, it's an idea. Okay, so it's a little bit more of an abstract concept. But when I'm changing it from a percentage to a number in doing either a fraction or a decimal, when I change it to a decimal, I've moved my decimal twice to the left. No matter how many numbers are here, it's always twice, only 2 times. Okay, that's really important. The other thing I like to help students remember, because we will go back and forth between percents and decimals, when you look at the alphabet, to go from the letter D to the letter P, you have to go to the right. So when you're going from a decimal to a percent, your decimal moves right. To go from the letter P to the letter D, you have to go left. So to go from a percent to a decimal, you move your decimal left. And this is always 2 times. Okay, so let's try it. So we have 87% as a decimal, so let's write it without the percentage sign. We know that our decimal always starts at the end of the number, just like the periods at the end of a sentence. And I move it once, twice to the left. So I should get 0 because I have to have that 0 in front, and 87 hundredths. Now, when this is 1 or 2 numbers, it should end with the word hundredths at the end. But when there's more than 2 numbers, it might not be the case, and we'll look at that one next. So here, same idea, but now we have 45 and 9/10%. Well, now we have 3 numbers, so still write it. Now your decimal is here. So since your decimal is starting between 2 numbers, you still move it twice to the left. So you still go 1, 2, okay, because we're going from P to D, so we move it to the left, and we always move it just 2 places. So now in this case, our number is going to be 0 and 459 thousandths. When you have numbers after the decimal in your percentage, that's going to back up your ending place value. Okay, so 2 or less numbers means that it's going to end in the hundredth place. Anything bigger than 2 numbers or longer than 2 numbers is going to end in a different decimal place value. Okay, but always follow this process. Just move it twice to the left. Because what you're doing is you're taking it and you are dividing it by 100. And remember, when you divide by 100, so let's take 500 and divide it by 100. And we know that that gives us 5. Well, what we did is we said, okay, we took that decimal and we moved it once, twice to the left. So anytime you're moving the decimal, you're dividing by a power of 10. So in this case, all the time with percentages, we're dividing by 100. All right, so now we're going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to look at 75 hundredths. Well, 75 hundredths as a fraction is 75 per 100. So then I know since a percent is per 100, I know that 75 over 100, or 75 hundredths, would be 75%. Okay, so how about 8 tenths? First, let's look at how we write this as a fraction. As a fraction, this would be 8 tenths. But we want to talk about per 100. So we're going to multiply both of these by 10. And we get 80 hundredths. So as a percent, it's 80%. Now, the other way that you can look at this is follow that same process that we talked about before. So you have 0 and 8 tenths, and you're going to take your decimal, but since you're going from a decimal to a percent, you're moving it to the right 2 spaces. So 1, 2, since I added another space, I have to add a 0, and now the decimal is at the end, so it moved there, so it's 80%. Okay, so again, you can try this on your own, or you can go through it with me again, and you can do it either way. Actually, let's kind of practice both, so go ahead and change it to a fraction and then to a percent, and then just use the method of swinging the decimal. So to change it to a fraction, it's 4 tenths. Okay, and you multiply it by 10. Multiply it by 10 gives me 40 over 100. 40%. Or I have 0 and 4 tenths. I take my decimal because I'm going from D to P, so I move it to the right 2 places, add a 0, and that's going to give me 40%. Okay, again, another way you can look at this, because a big confusion that students have is they see this and they think, ooh, that's 4%. Add that 0 at the end that we took off. So when you see 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths, whatever, add that 0 at the end and make it end in the hundredths place. Right? That might help you out a little bit, because 4% is actually going to be 2 places, because remember, 4% you have to move your decimal twice to the left, so a 0 is between that and the decimal. Okay, so here's another tough one. Still follow that process. So this is where changing it to a number over 100 will be a little bit complicated, because now you have 897 over 1,000, because it's 897 thousandths. So when you divide this by 100 to get it, or by 10, I'm sorry, to get it down to 100, dividing by 10 moves the decimal once to the left, You get 897 and 7 tenths over 100, which would be 89 and 7 tenths percent. Or, this is where following that process makes it a little easier. Okay, we're multiplying it by 100 to change it to a percent. So we move it twice to the right, which gives you 89 and 7/10%. Okay, so then now you guys have some problems of your own, and I'm going to get to what looks like your notes. Okay, so you have all these problems that I'd like you to try on your own. We have a couple tricky ones here, so 123%, 65 and 4/10%, okay, 1 and 37/100ths. Okay, so these might be a little bit tricky, but I want you to try them and come back with what you think is the correct answer. As always, if you have any questions, be sure to write them down or email me so we can go over them in class.